It all started with a sound Jordan Carter would never forget. The sharp click of a boarding pass scanner followed by the low, dismissive chuckle of the white flight attendant who stood like a gatekeeper at the threshold of first class, her neatly pressed uniform and stiff scarf tucked under her chin as if she were guarding royalty. Not an airplane cabin. Jordan, just 14 years old but with the height of a basketball player and the nervous excitement of a kid about to taste luxury for the first time, clutched his ticket tightly in his hand, the bold print 2A first class stamped across it like a golden seal. His dad's gift for all the late nights he had stayed up studying, for every A he'd brought home this semester, for every time he had proven to his parents that even as a young black boy in America, he could excel, and he whispered to himself as he stepped forward, "This is my seat, my chance, my day." But the flight attendant's eyes, sharp and narrowed, scanned him up and down like he was some kind of intruder who had slipped past security, and with a voice dripping in condescension she snapped, "Excuse me, young man, this is first class. You need to turn around. Economy is behind you," making Jordan's face heat up instantly as all the confidence drained from his body. And he stammered, "No, ma'am, this is my seat 2A, see?" extending his ticket with trembling fingers. But instead of apologizing or even looking carefully, she yanked it from his hand, squinted at it, then scoffed in disbelief, saying loud enough for the older white business travelers already seated to hear, "Well, this must be a mistake. I don't know how you got this. But you don't belong here." And that phrase, "you don't belong here," landed on Jordan's chest like a stone, heavy and suffocating, because in that moment he felt every whispered warning his parents had ever given him about how the world would sometimes treat him, not for who he was but for what he looked like. Passengers glanced up, some with curiosity, some with quiet approval of the flight attendant's order, and one man in a suit even chuckled under his breath, shaking his head like he agreed while Jordan's eyes watered and his voice cracked. "Please, ma'am, my dad bought me this seat. He'll be here soon, I promise I'm not lying." But she had already gestured to a burly white male gate agent who marched over with a kind of swagger that said he enjoyed removing troublemakers, and without a moment's hesitation he plucked the backpack off Jordan's shoulder, muttering, "Let's not make a scene, kid. First class is for paying customers," as if Jordan had stolen something, and the boy, heart racing, humiliation burning his cheeks, was escorted back out of the cabin like a criminal while whispers followed him down the aisle. Figures. Probably tried to sneak in, entitled. Each word like a dagger in his young heart. And by the time he was dropped into a plastic chair by the gate, the agent smirking at him like he'd done society a favor, Jordan couldn't even hold back the tears anymore. He buried his face in his hands, clutching the memory of the last thing his father had said before leaving the office that morning. "Hold your head high, son. Today's about you. You earned this. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and watch till the end, because what happened next will shock you. And it's the kind of story that makes you realize racism isn't just history. It's happening in real time. And sometimes justice comes faster than anyone expects." Jordan sat there for what felt like forever, the sterile brightness of the terminal buzzing in his ears, the sound of rolling suitcases and boarding announcements blurring together as he wondered if he should call his dad or just disappear into the crowd. Because how could he admit that he had been humiliated, stripped of dignity, treated like a trespasser in a space he had every right to be? But just as his body began to fold in on itself with shame, the sliding glass doors at the far end of the terminal hissed open, and in strode Anthony Carter, his father, a man whose presence could silence a boardroom with a single raised brow, a man who at 42 had risen from the son of a postal worker in Atlanta to CEO of Carter Dynamics, one of the fastest growing tech companies in the country. And though he was dressed casually by his standards, navy suit without the tie, polished brown shoes, a Rolex peeking from his cuff, there was no mistaking the aura of authority that followed him like a shadow. Anthony's eyes, dark and sharp, scanned the gate area until they landed on his son, crumpled in the corner like a wilted flower. And something primal snapped inside him, the memory of every time he had been told as a boy that he didn't belong, every time he had been followed in a store, every time a white teacher had lowered expectations simply because of his skin color, all of it boiling to the surface as he crossed the floor in long, decisive strides. And when Jordan looked up, his voice barely a whisper, "Dad, they kicked me out." Anthony crouched, gripped his son's shoulder, and said with a controlled calmness that made his anger even more terrifying, "Who did this?" And when Jordan pointed with a shaky finger at the flight attendant and gate agent still gossiping by the counter, Anthony rose to his full 6'2" height and walked toward them, his polished shoes clicking like a countdown, his jaw tight, his baritone voice slicing through the hum of the airport as he demanded, "Why was my son removed from his rightful seat in first class?" The gate agent, taken aback for a moment, tried to mask his nerves with arrogance, puffing out his chest. "Sir, your boy must have snuck up there. He didn't look like he belonged, and you know how kids are, always trying to bend the rules." But Anthony's laugh, low, humorless, cut him off, and he pulled from his pocket not only Jordan's boarding pass but his own, both marked first class, holding them up like evidence in a courtroom as he said, "Do you even know who you just humiliated? Do you know whose contract keeps your airline systems running? My name is Anthony Carter, CEO of Carter Dynamics, and you just discriminated against my son because of the color of his skin." And the words echoed through the gate like a gavel, heads turning, passengers gasping, phones lifting to record as the realization sank in, and the flight attendant's smugness melted into horror, her lips parting with stammered excuses. "Sir, I didn't mean. It was a misunderstanding." But Anthony wasn't letting her off, his voice rising just enough for everyone to hear. "A misunderstanding is mixing up seat numbers, not dragging a 14-year-old black child out of first class because you assumed he didn't belong. This isn't a misunderstanding. It's racism, plain and simple." And as the crowd murmured, some nodding in agreement, others shamefully looking away, Anthony dialed a number on his phone, his tone calm but lethal. "Yes, corporate relations. Put me through to legal. I want the JFK branch staff roster for Flight 327 pulled immediately. Disciplinary procedures expedited. Yes, today." And within moments his assistant had texted back, "Handled," and Anthony looked the staff dead in the eyes. "You won't be working here by sundown," leaving them pale and speechless. The passengers erupted into whispers, some clapping softly, others recording the moment that they knew would go viral by nightfall. And Jordan, watching from the corner, felt his chest swell with a pride that almost erased the sting of humiliation. His dad wasn't just defending him, he was teaching the world a lesson, exposing the ugliness for everyone to see. But Anthony wasn't done, because he knew this wasn't just about his son. It was about every child of color who had ever been told they didn't belong. And so he turned back to the crowd, his voice steady, powerful. "Justice is not when the powerful defend themselves. It's when they defend those without power. And today I will make sure accountability happens." And Jordan's tears turned into a shaky smile, because for the first time since this nightmare began, he felt safe, seen and loved in a way words could never capture. The cameras clicked furiously as reporters swarmed the family on the tarmac, the hot Atlanta sun glinting off the polished wings of the private jet, as the CEO father wrapped an arm protectively around his wife and daughter. His face a mask of stern authority and raw, contained fury, his voice steady but edged with steel as he addressed the journalists. "What happened today at this airport is not just about my daughter. It is about every single black traveler who has ever been disrespected, humiliated or dismissed because of the color of their skin, and I want you all to know that I will not rest until accountability is served. Not only here but across every major hub in this country." And as the sound bites traveled across live feeds, Twitter lit up with hashtags demanding justice. Activists tagged Axiom USA in solidarity, and overnight the incident transformed from a private humiliation to a national debate about racism, privilege, and corporate responsibility, with pundits on cable shows replaying the grainy cell phone footage of the gate agent sneering, "People like you can't sit in first class unless you pay double," and then splicing in the stunned face of the CEO's daughter as the guard shoved her boarding pass aside. The cruelty immortalized in pixels forever. The airline scrambled to respond, releasing a stiff apology that only inflamed things further, because in it they referred to the young woman simply as a customer, instead of acknowledging her by name, a detail the public seized upon as proof of ongoing dismissal, and within hours, say her name trended alongside our flying while black, and donations poured into racial justice nonprofits. But while the world argued, the CEO father worked silently behind the scenes, leveraging his Axiom USA connections to initiate a full-scale investigation, sending compliance officers and lawyers into the airport at dawn, their crisp suits and briefcases signaling the storm that had arrived. And when they walked into the regional manager's office unannounced, they slid across a manila folder fat with signed affidavits, photos, and timestamps, the manager's face draining of color as he realized the scope of the evidence against his team. Yet still he tried to bluster, This is all being blown out of proportion, only to be cut off by the lead investigator who leaned forward and whispered, "Sir, it's already over, you just don't know it yet." Back at the mansion that evening, the daughter sat in the garden staring at the koi pond, the smell of jasmine heavy in the humid air, her fingers trembling as she scrolled through thousands of supportive messages online, tears pricking her eyes at the thought that strangers cared more for her dignity than the very staff paid to serve her at the airport. And when her father approached, she whispered, "Dad, I didn't ask for this fight," and he gently replied, "Sometimes the fight chooses you, sweetheart, and when it does, you don't back down, you rise." His words carrying the same cadence he used when addressing shareholders, yet softer, more personal, infused with love. Days turned into weeks, the hearings began, subpoenas were issued, and the employees responsible were summoned one by one into sterile conference rooms where they faced panels of lawyers and federal auditors, their voices quivering as they tried to explain away their actions, some breaking down in tears, others defiant. But the evidence was overwhelming. From security footage to audio recordings secretly captured by horrified bystanders, and one by one the dominoes fell. Suspensions, firings, lawsuits, each headline amplifying the narrative of accountability. But the father was not satisfied with punishment alone. He wanted reform, systemic change. And so he launched a partnership between Axiom USA and several airlines, mandating anti-bias training, anonymous passenger hotlines, and severe penalties for discriminatory behavior. And though critics scoffed at the idea of corporate-led justice, the public cheered. Because here was a man who didn't just demand respect for his family, but sought to protect countless strangers who would never know his name, only that someone somewhere fought for their right to board a plane with dignity. Yet even as victories stacked, the family faced new challenges like threats in the mail, shadowy figures lingering near their gated driveway, whispers that powerful interests were angered by the CEO's crusade. And one chilling night the daughter awoke to find the garden lights shattered and the koi pond poisoned, every fish floating lifeless. A silent message left in the water's reflection. The father clenched his jaw, tightened security, and pressed on, because retreat was not in his nature. And though fear gnawed at the edges of their lives, so too did hope, for every time the daughter spoke publicly, more survivors of racism came forward, emboldened by her courage, and together they built a movement larger than any single scandal, a fire that spread across airports, boardrooms, and living rooms until change was not just demanded but inevitable. And so the story that began with humiliation at a gate ended with triumph at the highest levels. As Congress invited the daughter and father to testify, their words broadcast live to millions. And when she stood before the microphone, her voice clear, resolute, unwavering, she declared, "I am not here because of who my father is. I am here because no daughter, no mother, no son, no father, no one should ever feel less human in the land of the free." And in that moment the chamber erupted in applause, not because she was the daughter of a CEO, but because she was every black traveler who had ever been told they didn't belong. And as cameras panned to her father's proud, tear-filled eyes, it became clear that this was more than a family's fight. It was America's reckoning, a story not just of pain but of resilience, justice, and the unshakable truth that dignity is not a privilege, it is a right.